The fluorescent lights of the market buzzed overhead like dying wasps, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made the bruised apples look even more unappetizing. I shifted my weight from one aching foot to the other, feeling the worn sole of my right sneaker, the one with the hole I'd been ignoring for 3 months, press against the cold tile floor. The air smelled of bleach and rotting produce, mixed with that particular staleness that clung to places open 24 hours a day. It was 11:47 p.m. I knew because I'd checked my phone obsessively every few minutes, watching the minutes crawl toward midnight when my shift would finally end. My lower back throbbed with that deep, persistent ache that came from standing for 8 hours straight, scanning items, forcing smiles at customers who looked through me like I was part of the machinery. "Ma'am, do you have any more of the organic milk in the back?" I blinked, focusing on the woman in front of me, designer purse, manicured nails, the kind of casual wealth that didn't even register its own privilege. "I can check," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. "When you work the graveyard shift at Save More Marketplace, you learn to speak as little as possible." The back room was cooler, darker. I leaned against the metal shelving for just a moment, closing my eyes. 5 years. 5 years since I'd walked away from everything. Or rather, since everything had been ripped away from me. 5 years of this, working 2 jobs, counting pennies, watching my son grow up in hand-me-down clothes while I pretended it was an adventure. There was no organic milk. When I returned to the register, the woman had already moved to another line, unwilling to wait even 3 minutes. I didn't blame her. I wouldn't have waited for me either. The automatic doors whooshed open, bringing in a gust of November wind that smelled of rain and exhaust. I barely glanced up, until the entire energy of the store seemed to shift, as if the air pressure had suddenly changed. The other cashier, Denise, actually stopped mid-scan, her mouth falling slightly open. 3 men walked in. No, that wasn't accurate. 2 men walked in, flanking a third, who moved like he owned not just the store, but the very ground beneath it. Even from 50 feet away, I could see the cut of his suit, dark, probably black. Definitely not bought off any rack I'd ever seen. The fabric caught the terrible fluorescent light and somehow made it look intentional, expensive. My hands went cold. I told myself I was imagining things. It had been 5 years. 5 years, and this city had 12 million people. And there was no reason, no possible reason, he would ever set foot in a place like this. But then he turned his head, just slightly, and I saw his profile. Sharp, aristocratic. The kind of bone structure that belonged on Roman coins or Renaissance paintings. Dark hair, shorter than I remembered, but still with that slight wave that suggested carelessness, even though nothing about him was ever careless. Dante Moretti. The name echoed in my head like a death knell. My breath caught in my throat. The scanner in my hand suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. I ducked my head, letting my hair, longer now, darker, dyed a mousy brown instead of the auburn it used to be, fall forward to hide my face. "He won't recognize you," I told myself frantically. "You're invisible here. You've always been invisible." But even as I thought it, I felt the weight of his gaze sweep across the store like a searchlight. Hunting. Always hunting. The 2 men with him were clearly security. One was built like a bulldozer, his neck the same width as his head, an earpiece visible even from this distance. The other was leaner, sharper, his eyes constantly moving, cataloging exits and threats with mechanical precision. They didn't browse. They didn't shop. They simply existed as extensions of the man between them. Dante moved toward the back of the store with that same predatory grace I remembered. Efficient, purposeful, utterly confident. He was here for something specific. Men like him didn't make random stops at discount markets at midnight. "Please don't come to my register. Please don't come to my register." I began scanning items that weren't there, just to look busy, just to have a reason to keep my head down. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was certain everyone in the store could hear it. "Mommy?" The word hit me like a bullet. I spun around to see my son, our son, running toward me from the employee break room, his dinosaur backpack bouncing against his small shoulders. Marco had been doing his homework back there, waiting for my shift to end so we could take the bus home together. "Marco, I told you to stay." But he was already at the counter, his small hands gripping the edge, bouncing on his toes with 5-year-old energy that knew no concept of exhaustion. "I finished my math. Miss Chen said I got all the addition problems right." His voice carried. Of course it carried. Children's voices always carried, especially in quiet spaces where you desperately needed them not to. I felt it before I saw it, that shift in attention, that predatory focus swinging in our direction like a gun barrel finding its target. When I finally forced myself to look up, Dante Moretti was standing 30 feet away, holding a bottle of water he clearly had no intention of drinking. His eyes, God, those eyes, dark as midnight and twice as dangerous, were locked directly on Marco, who had his father's face in miniature. The same strong jaw, the same straight nose, the same thick dark hair that would never lay quite flat no matter how much I tried to comb it down, the same intensity in his gaze, even at 5 years old. Time seemed to crystallize, each second stretching into eternity. Dante's expression didn't change. It never did. That was part of what made him so terrifying. But I saw the recognition flicker through his eyes like lightning across a dark sky. Saw his posture shift almost imperceptibly, every muscle tensing like a predator preparing to strike. The bottle of water slipped from his hand. It hit the floor with a crack that seemed impossibly loud, water spraying across the tiles in a corona of liquid that caught the fluorescent light. But Dante didn't look down, didn't acknowledge it. His security did. The bulldozer was already moving to clean it up. But Dante himself remained absolutely still, his gaze moving from Marco to me. Our eyes met. 5 years collapsed into nothing. I was 22 again, standing in his penthouse, my hands shaking as I signed the divorce papers he'd had delivered by a lawyer who'd looked at me with such contempt I'd wanted to disappear into the floor. I was 22 again, crying in a women's shelter bathroom after learning I was pregnant, knowing I could never tell him, knowing what he'd become after his father's murder, knowing that the man I'd married had died the same night Lorenzo Moretti had. Emma. He said my name like a prayer and a curse combined, his voice cutting through the ambient noise of the store, the buzzing lights, the distant hum of refrigeration units, someone's phone ringing 3 aisles over. Marco looked up at me, confusion crossing his small face. "Mommy, do you know that man?" "Run," every instinct screamed. Grab Marco and run. But where? Where could I possibly run that Dante Moretti couldn't find me if he wanted to? He was moving toward us now, his security flanking him automatically, and I realized with growing horror that the entire store had gone quiet. The other customers were staring. Denise had her hand over her mouth. Even the manager had emerged from his office, drawn by whatever electricity was crackling through the air. "Emma," Dante said again, closer now, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive with notes of cedar and smoke that transported me back to silk sheets and whispered promises in the dark. "I think we need to talk." His eyes dropped to Marco again, and I saw something flicker across his face, something raw and hungry and possessive that made my blood run cold. "No," I heard myself say, my voice barely a whisper. "No, we don't." I grabbed Marco's hand, probably too tight, and started backing away from the register. My manager would fire me. I didn't care. I'd find another job. I always found another job. "Emma." Not a request this time. A command, delivered in that same quiet tone he'd used to order executions, to condemn men to death, to build an empire on blood and fear. Running didn't work 5 years ago. It won't work now. Marco tugged at my hand. "Mommy, you're hurting me." I loosened my grip immediately, even as tears pricked at my eyes. "I'm sorry, baby. We just need to." "How old is he?" Dante's voice was closer, much closer. When had he gotten so close? I looked up to find him standing directly in front of my register, separated from me by nothing but a conveyor belt and 5 years of secrets. His security had positioned themselves to block the exits, casually, as if by accident. But I knew better. The lean one was on his phone, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Calling for the car, probably, or backup. Or worse. "That's none of your business," I managed, hating how my voice shook. Dante tilted his head slightly, studying Marco with an intensity that made me want to physically put myself between them. He looks like me. It wasn't a question. Marco, bless him, piped up with all the fearlessness of a child who'd never known danger. My name is Marco James Carter. I'm 5 3/4. I'm in kindergarten. Carter. My maiden name. The name I'd reclaimed after the divorce, trying to erase every trace of the 3 months I'd spent as Emma Moretti, as if changing my name could somehow change what I'd been, what I'd seen, what I'd learned about the man I'd married. Marco, Dante repeated softly, and there was something in his voice, wonder, rage. I couldn't tell, and that uncertainty terrified me more than anything. A strong name. He crouched down suddenly, bringing himself to eye level with our son, and my heart stopped beating entirely. Marco, do you know who I am? His voice was gentle now, almost kind, and that was when I knew we were truly in danger. Dante Moretti was never kind unless he wanted something. Marco shook his head, his dinosaur backpack rustling. No, sir. But you dress really nice. Are you a prince? Despite everything, despite the terror and the shaking, and the knowledge that my carefully constructed life was crumbling around me, I almost laughed. A prince. If only he knew. Dante smiled. I'd forgotten that smile, forgotten how it could transform his face from something carved from marble into something almost human. Almost. Not a prince, he said softly. But I am someone who's very interested in getting to know you better, Marco. You can't, I interjected, finally finding my voice, finally managing to step forward and physically place myself between them. You have no right. No right? Dante rose to his full height in one fluid motion, and suddenly he wasn't kind anymore. He towered over me, 6 feet of lethal grace and barely contained fury, and his voice, when he spoke, was soft as a knife sliding between ribs. I think we have very different definitions of rights, wife. Ex-wife, I corrected, even though my hands were shaking so badly I had to clench them into fists. A technicality, he murmured, and then his hand, warm, callous despite all his wealth, cupped my chin, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. The touch was gentle, possessive, absolutely inescapable. Did you really think you could hide my son from me forever? He's not your son. The lie tasted like ash on my tongue, but I forced it out anyway, even as Dante's fingers tightened fractionally against my jaw. Not painful. He'd never hurt me physically, that wasn't his style, but enough to remind me that he could, that he held all the power here, that I was helpless as I'd always been in his presence. Don't. The single word was barely audible, yet it cut through the air like a whip crack. Don't insult my intelligence, Emma. Those are my eyes looking back at me. That's my blood in his veins. His gaze flickered to Marco, who was watching us with growing confusion, and something softened in Dante's expression. Something that looked almost like grief. 5 years. You kept him from me for 5 years. You were busy, I shot back, jerking my chin from his grasp, building your empire on corpses. What was I supposed to do? Bring a baby into that world? Let him grow up learning that violence is love, that power is the only thing that matters? The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Dante's face went absolutely blank. That terrible emptiness that meant he was feeling too much, processing too much, calculating too many moves ahead. We're leaving, he said quietly. All of us. Now. Like hell. Emma. He leaned in close enough that his breath ghosted across my ear, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body through his suit. You have 2 choices. You can walk out of here with dignity, holding our son's hand, and we can have a civilized conversation in the car. Or I can have Luca carry you both out, and we can have a very different kind of conversation in a very different location. My blood turned to ice. You wouldn't. Test me. The words were silk over steel. Please, I would very much enjoy demonstrating exactly how far I'm willing to go to claim what's mine. Marco tugged on my sleeve. Mommy, I don't like this. You said we were going home. Home. Our tiny apartment with the leaky ceiling and the radiator that only worked half the time. The place I'd built from nothing, where we were safe, where we were free, where Dante Moretti's shadow couldn't reach. Except it had reached, It had always been reaching. I'd just been too naive to realize I could never truly escape. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. Even though nothing was okay, nothing would ever be okay again. This man wants to talk to Mommy for a little bit." "About what?" "Grown-up things." Dante's hand settled on the small of my back. Proprietary, possessive, sending electricity shooting up my spine despite every instinct screaming at me to pull away. "Your mother and I are old friends," he said smoothly, that charming mask sliding into place so easily it made me want to scream. "We haven't seen each other in a very long time." "Oh." Marco brightened immediately, because of course he did. He was 5. He didn't understand that monsters could wear expensive suits and speak in cultured tones. "Are you the friend from before I was born?" "Mommy doesn't talk about before very much. She says it makes her sad." I watched Dante's jaw tighten, watched something flicker behind his eyes. Hurt? Anger? With him, it was always impossible to tell. "Yes," he said after a moment. "From before you were born. The manager, Tom, his name was Tom, I'd worked here for 8 months and barely knew anything about him, approached hesitantly, wringing his hands. "Emma? Is everything? Should I call someone?" "Yes," I wanted to scream. "Call the police. Call the FBI. Call someone who can stop this." But who would come? Who would dare intervene when Dante Moretti decided he wanted something? The police commissioner was on his payroll. Half the judges in the city owed him favors, and the ones who didn't. Well, they knew better than to make an enemy of the man who controlled the docks, the construction unions, the waste management contracts. "Everything's fine," Dante answered before I could, and his smile was warm, friendly, utterly convincing. "Just an unexpected reunion." "I hope you don't mind if I borrow Emma for the rest of her shift?" He pulled out his wallet, black leather, probably worth more than I made in a month, and extracted what looked like several $100 bills. For the inconvenience, Tom took the money with shaking hands, his eyes wide. Of course, Mr. That won't be necessary," Dante interrupted smoothly, tucking his wallet away. "Emma, shall we?" It wasn't a question. The November air hit me like a slap when we exited the store, cold and sharp with the promise of winter. A black SUV was idling at the curb. Not just any SUV, but an armored Escalade with windows so dark I couldn't see inside. The kind of vehicle that screamed money and danger in equal measure. The lean security guard, Luca, Dante had called him, opened the rear door with practiced efficiency. The interior was cream leather and ambient lighting, warm and comfortable and utterly foreign to the world I'd been living in. "I'll get my car," I said desperately. "We can follow you. Your 2008 Honda with the broken tail light and the expired registration?" Dante's voice held a trace of amusement. "I don't think so, Kara. Marco, can you climb up? That's it, good boy." He lifted our son into the vehicle with an ease that spoke of unconscious strength, and I watched Marco's eyes go wide as he took in the luxury surrounding him. "Whoa," he breathed. "This is like a spaceship." "Better than a spaceship," Dante murmured, and then his hand was on my elbow, guiding me inexorably toward the open door. "Emma, don't make this difficult." I climbed in because what choice did I have? Because fighting would scare Marco. Because some part of me, the part I'd tried so hard to kill over the past 5 years, remembered what it felt like to surrender to Dante Moretti's will. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded like a prison cell locking. Dante slid in beside me, close enough that his thigh pressed against mine. Close enough that I could smell that damned cologne again. The driver, an older man with silver hair and the build of a retired boxer, pulled away from the curb without needing to be told. "Where are we going?" My voice sounded small in the quiet interior. "Somewhere we can talk." Dante's attention was fixed on Marco, who was exploring the car with unbridled curiosity, pressing buttons on the door panel that made the window go up and down. "Marco, do you like cars?" "I like dinosaurs better," Marco announced seriously. "But cars are okay. Mommy says we'll get a better car someday when we have more money." I closed my eyes, humiliation burning through me, of course. Of course my son would announce our poverty to the one man who embodied everything we'd lost. Does he? Dante's voice was dangerously soft. "What else does Mommy say?" She says we're brave adventurers living in our castle, but it's not really a castle. It's an apartment on the 3rd floor and the elevator's broken, so we have to use the stairs. Mommy says it's good exercise. Each innocent revelation felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I opened my eyes to find Dante staring at me, and the expression on his face was something I'd never seen before, a mixture of fury and something that looked almost like pain. 3rd floor walk up, he repeated quietly. Good exercise. We manage, I said through clenched teeth. I'm sure you do. His hand found mine in the darkness between us, fingers lacing through mine with an intimacy that made my breath catch. You always were resourceful. I imagine you've had to be, raising my son alone while working. How many jobs, Emma? 2? 3? That's none of your... It's all of my business. His grip tightened. Every meal he's eaten that I didn't provide. Every birthday I missed. Every night you struggled alone when you should have been. He cut himself off, jaw clenching. The car turned onto a private road I didn't recognize, lined with trees that blocked out the city lights. My heart started hammering again. Where are we going? I demanded, trying to pull my hand free. He didn't let go. My home. No, absolutely not. Turn this car around right now or I swear to God. You'll what? He turned to face me fully, and in the dim light of the car's interior, he looked like something carved from shadow and violence. Call the police? We both know how that ends. Make a scene? Frighten our son? His thumb stroked across my knuckles, a gesture that should have been comforting but felt like a brand. You're going to sit there quietly, you're going to smile for Marco, and you're going to accept that your time running is over. You can't just... I can. Simple. Absolute. I own this city, Emma. Every street, every building, every person who matters. Did you really think you could hide from me in it? That I wouldn't eventually find you? The truth hit me like a physical blow. You knew. You've known where I was all along. His smile was cold as winter. I've known where you were since the day you walked out of that women's shelter 3 years ago. Did you think I wouldn't have people watching? That I would simply let my wife disappear? Ex-wife, I whispered. But the correction felt meaningless now. You signed papers, he acknowledged. Meaningless papers drawn up when I was... not myself. When grief had made me into something even I didn't recognize. His gaze intensified. But you never stopped being mine, cara mia, and neither does he. Marco had fallen asleep against the window, exhausted from his late night, his small face peaceful in slumber. He looked so much like his father it made my chest ache. Why now? I asked quietly. If you've known where I was for 3 years, why come for us now? Dante was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on our sleeping son. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with an emotion I couldn't name. Because I've spent 5 years building an empire that means nothing. 5 years eliminating every threat, consolidating power, making myself untouchable. And for what? So I could die alone in a penthouse filled with things I don't care about? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that terrified me more than his anger ever could. Vulnerability. I buried my father. I destroyed the men who killed him. I've done everything I set out to do. And I'm empty, Emma. Completely empty. Until tonight, when I walked into that godforsaken market and saw my son for the first time. Dante? No. He raised a hand, cutting me off. You'll have your chance to speak, but first, you're going to see what I've built, what I can give him, what I can give you, if you'll let me. The car pulled through massive iron gates that opened automatically, revealing a driveway lined with lights. At the end of it sat a mansion, no, a palace, all modern glass and stone that seemed to glow from within. This wasn't the penthouse I remembered from our brief marriage. This was something else entirely. Something bigger, more isolated, more him. Welcome home, Emma, Dante said softly as the car came to a stop. I've been waiting for you. The mansion's interior was all soaring ceilings and marble floors that echoed with each footstep, making me feel even smaller than I already did. Dante carried Marco with a tenderness that seemed at odds with everything I knew about him, our son's head resting on his shoulder, small arms dangling limply in sleep. I followed behind, flanked by Luca and the bulldozer whose name I still didn't know, feeling less like a guest and more like a prisoner being escorted to her cell. "First door on the right," Dante murmured, and I realized he was speaking to me. "The bedroom's already prepared." Prepared? The word came out sharper than I intended. "How exactly did you prepare a bedroom when you supposedly just found us tonight?" He glanced back at me, and in the warm glow of the recessed lighting, I caught something in his expression. Guilt, maybe, or shame. "I've had this room ready for 3 years, Emma. Since the day I confirmed you were pregnant." The admission stole the breath from my lungs. The bedroom he led me to was fit for a prince. A race car bed dominated one corner. Bookshelves lined with picture books and educational toys I recognized from store windows I'd passed without ever being able to afford. A telescope stood by the window. Art supplies were organized in clear containers on a child-sized desk. Everything a 5-year-old boy could want, waiting in pristine silence for an occupant who'd never known it existed. Dante laid Marco down with a gentleness that made my throat tight, pulling a soft blanket over him that probably cost more than our monthly rent. He stood there for a moment, just watching our son sleep, his hand hovering above Marco's dark hair, as if afraid to touch, afraid this might all be a dream. "He snores," Dante said quietly. "A little." On the exhale. "He has allergies," I whispered back. "Nothing serious, just seasonal, I know." He finally stroked Marco's hair, just once, his expression so raw it hurt to look at. "I've read every medical record, Emma. Every report card. Every library book he's checked out. I know his favorite color is orange, that he's afraid of thunderstorms, that he begged you for a dog last Christmas, and you had to tell him the apartment doesn't allow pets. Each word was an accusation wrapped in velvet. You had no right. I had every right." When he turned to face me fully, and the veneer of gentleness evaporated like morning mist. "He's my son. My blood. Did you really think I would just let him exist without knowing everything about him?" "You let me go," I shot back. "You signed the divorce papers. You didn't fight. I was drowning." The admission came out harsh, bitten off. "My father's blood was still on my hands, literally on my hands, and you looked at me like I was a monster, like I terrified you, and I realized—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "I realized you were right to be terrified. I was a monster. I am a monster. So I let you go, because I thought it was what you wanted, what you needed. And then 3 months later, my people told me you were pregnant and I—" He cut himself off, turning away, his shoulders rigid with tension. "You what?" I demanded. My voice barely a whisper. "I broke everything in my office," he said flatly. "Flipped my desk. Put my fist through a window. Luca had to physically restrain me from going to find you, from dragging you back, from—" He laughed, a sound without humor. "I would have destroyed you, Emma. The state I was in, I would have caged you, kept you locked away, and I knew that would kill whatever love you once had for me faster than any bullet." My hands were shaking. I clasped them together, trying to still the tremors. "So you just watched? For 5 years?" 3, he corrected. "I didn't know where you were for 2 years. You were good at hiding. Better than I anticipated." He moved toward the door, gesturing for me to follow. "But yes. Once I found you, I watched. I made sure you were safe, that Marco was healthy, that no one bothered you. I paid off your landlord when he tried to evict you last January. I had someone slash the tires of that man from the restaurant who followed you home." Ice flooded my veins. "Marcus, the line cook, he was just following you home at 2 a.m? Dante's voice went deadly soft. "Waiting outside your apartment building?" "Yes, Emma. Just a friendly colleague. Nothing sinister at all." I remembered Marcus disappearing suddenly, how he'd stopped showing up for shifts without explanation. I'd thought he'd just quit, moved on. But now— "What did you do to him?" "Nothing permanent." Dante's smile was sharp as a blade. "He lives in Seattle now. has a very strong aversion to the entire state of New York. Quite happy in his new life, from what I understand. We'd reached what appeared to be a study. All dark wood and leather furniture, a fireplace crackling with real flames that cast dancing shadows across walls lined with books. A bar cart sat in one corner, crystal decanters catching the firelight like captured stars. "Sit," Dante commanded, gesturing to a leather sofa that probably cost more than my car. "I'd rather stand." "Emma." He poured 2 glasses of what looked like scotch, neat, and held one out to me. "Sit. Please, we need to talk. And I'd prefer to do it civilly." I took the glass but remained standing, the amber liquid sloshing slightly from my shaking hands. "There's nothing to talk about. You ambushed me at work, kidnapped us. I extended an invitation with armed guards and no option to refuse, which you accepted because you gave me no choice." The words came out louder than I intended, and I immediately glanced toward the hallway, terrified I'd woken Marco. But the house remained silent except for the crackling fire. Dante drained his scotch in one smooth motion, set the glass down with controlled precision, and moved toward me with that predatory grace that made my pulse spike. I backed up instinctively, but he kept coming until my back hit the bookshelf, and he was right there, one hand braced against the shelf beside my head, caging me in. "Do you know?" he said conversationally, though his eyes were anything but calm. "What it's been like? Watching you struggle? Seeing you take that second job at the diner? Watching you work yourself to exhaustion? Knowing that one word from me, one single word, and you'd never have to worry about money again? I don't want your money. No. You made that abundantly clear when you left every piece of jewelry I ever gave you, every credit card, every key to every property." His free hand came up to cup my face, thumb stroking across my cheekbone with heartbreaking gentleness. "You walked away with nothing but a suitcase and your pride. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? How extraordinary." "I'm not extraordinary," I whispered. "I'm just someone who didn't want to be married to a killer." The words hung between us like a guillotine blade. Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Acknowledgement, maybe. Acceptance. "Fair enough," he said quietly. "But that killer is also a father now. And like it or not, Kara, that connects us in ways a piece of paper never could. What do you want?" My voice cracked on the question. "Just tell me what you want so we can get this over with." "I want my son to know me." Simple words, but weighted with so much more. I want him to grow up safe, protected, with every advantage I can give him. I want him to have the childhood I never had, the stability, the security. He has that. We have that. You have a 3rd-floor walk-up with a broken elevator and a landlord I have to bribe to keep you housed. His voice remained gentle, but the words cut deep. You work 16-hour days and still can barely make rent. Marco's winter coat is 2 sizes too small, and I've watched you go hungry so he could have seconds at dinner. Is that really the life you want for him? For yourself? Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. It's honest. It's clean. It's ours. And it's killing you. His thumb caught a tear that had escaped despite my best efforts. "I can see it, Emma. You're exhausted. You've lost weight. There are shadows under your eyes that weren't there 5 years ago. And your hands—" He lifted my right hand, running his fingers over the calluses, the rough skin, the scar from where I'd burned myself on the fryer at work. "These aren't the hands I remember. People change. They shouldn't have to change this much." He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent electricity shooting up my arm. "Let me help you. Let me give Marco the life he deserves." In exchange for what? Because there was always an exchange with men like Dante. Nothing came free. His smile was sad, knowing. Your presence in his life, regular visitation, a chance to be his father. That's it? I didn't believe him. Couldn't believe him. For now. He stepped back, giving me space to breathe, though the air between us still felt charged with electricity. "I'm not going to lie to you, Emma. Eventually, I want more. I want you back under my roof, under my protection, under me. The last two words were delivered with such deliberate sensuality that heat flooded my cheeks. But I understand that won't happen overnight. I understand I need to earn your trust again. Prove that I'm not the man you ran from 5 years ago. Are you? I challenged. Are you different? Or have you just gotten better at hiding what you are? He considered the question seriously, head tilting slightly. Both, perhaps. I've learned control. Learned to channel the violence, to use it strategically rather than letting it use me. But am I still capable of terrible things? His eyes locked with mine. Absolutely. Especially when it comes to protecting what's mine. A phone buzzed. His phone, pulled from an inner pocket with smooth efficiency. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and typed something quickly before tucking it away. Business? I asked, hating that I was curious. Always. He moved to the bar cart, refilling his glass. The city doesn't sleep, and neither does its underworld. Speaking of which, we need to discuss security. My stomach dropped. Security? You think you're the only one who's been looking for me in the past 5 years? His voice went hard. I have enemies, Emma. Powerful enemies who would very much like to hurt me, and the fastest way to hurt me is through the people I care about. Now that Marco exists, now that people will know about him. He trailed off, but the implication was clear. Then we'll disappear again, I said desperately. We'll leave the city, change our names, and I'll find you again. Or worse, someone else will find you first. He drained half his scotch. No, there's only one solution that keeps you both safe. You stay here, under my protection, with security that would make the president jealous. You mean we stay here as your prisoners? I mean you stay here as my family. The word landed like a bomb between us. This house has 12 bedrooms, Emma. You can have your own wing if you want, your own space, privacy, whatever you need. Marco can go to the best schools, have the best tutors, the best of everything, and you... His gaze raked over me, hungry and possessive. You can stop working yourself to death. You can rest, breathe, live. It sounded like heaven. It sounded like a trap. I need to think, I said, setting down my untouched scotch with trembling hands. Of course. He was the picture of reasonableness, which somehow made me trust him even less. Take all the time you need. There's a bedroom prepared for you as well, right across the hall from Marco's. Fresh clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, everything you might need. How did you... I know your sizes, Emma. I know everything about you. He said it like a confession, like a threat, like a promise. A door opened somewhere in the house, followed by footsteps. Luca appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Sir, the perimeter is secure, and I've placed guards at all entry points as requested. Good. Make sure the second floor is completely off limits to everyone except Emma and Marco. No exceptions. Yes, sir. After Luca disappeared, I turned to Dante. How many people work for you? How many guns are in this house right now? Enough to keep you safe. He moved toward me again, and this time I didn't back away. I know you're frightened. I know this isn't what you wanted, and I'm sorry for that. But Emma... His hand found my waist, pulling me infinitesimally closer. I will burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone harm our son. Or you. The terrifying thing was, I believed him. I didn't sleep. The bedroom Dante had prepared for me was obscene in its luxury. A king-sized bed with sheets that felt like water, a bathroom with heated floors and a tub large enough to swim in, a walk-in closet filled with clothes in my exact size, all with the tag still attached. Designer labels I recognized from magazine spreads, dresses, jeans, cashmere sweaters, in colors I'd mentioned liking years ago in passing conversations I'd assumed he'd forgotten. He'd forgotten nothing. I spent the night in the chair by the window, watching the sunrise paint the manicured grounds in shades of gold and rose. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter at regular intervals. I counted 6 different men, though I suspected there were more I couldn't see. The iron gates at the end of the driveway remained closed, imposing, final. A gilded cage, just as I'd feared. Around 7, I heard small footsteps padding down the hall, followed by Marco's voice, high and uncertain. Mommy? I was out of the chair and through the door before he could call again, scooping him up even though he was getting too big for it, breathing in the familiar scent of his strawberry shampoo. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." "Where are we?" He pulled back to look at me, his dark eyes, Dante's eyes, wide with confusion. "This isn't home." "No, we're visiting. Remember the man from last night? This is his house." "The prince man?" Marco's face brightened. "He said I could have pancakes for breakfast, with chocolate chips. Can I, Mommy, please?" Before I could answer, Dante's voice drifted up from the first floor. "I believe I promised someone chocolate chip pancakes. Is he awake?" Marco wriggled out of my arms and ran to the top of the stairs, peering down. "I'm awake. I'm very awake." Dante stood at the bottom, and my breath caught. He'd changed from last night's suit into dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that clung to his shoulders in a way that should be illegal. Casual. Almost normal. Except for the gun I could see holstered at his hip, barely concealed by the sweater's hem. "Then you'd better come down before they get cold," he said, smiling up at our son with such naked longing it made my chest ache. "Your mother, too, if she's hungry." The kitchen was a chef's dream, all gleaming stainless steel and marble countertops, professional-grade appliances that probably cost more than I'd make in a decade. A woman in her 50s stood at the stove, expertly flipping pancakes, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "This is Maria," Dante introduced, one hand settling on the small of my back in a gesture that felt far too natural. "She's been with my family since I was Marco's age. Maria, this is Emma, and this young man is my son, Marco." Maria's eyes widened fractionally. Surprise, recognition, something else I couldn't identify, before her face smoothed into professional warmth. "It's a pleasure to meet you both. I hope you're hungry. I've made enough to feed an army." She had. The kitchen island was laden with food. Pancakes, fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, bacon, pastries that looked like they'd come from a bakery. Marco's eyes went round as saucers. "Is this all for us?" he whispered. "All for you," Dante confirmed, lifting him onto a bar stool with easy strength. "What would you like to try first?" I watched, frozen in the doorway, as Dante helped Marco pile food onto his plate, explaining what each pastry was called, laughing when our son got chocolate on his nose. He was good with him. Natural, like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. "Emma?" Maria's gentle voice drew my attention. "Coffee? You look like you could use it. That obvious?" I managed a weak smile. "You look like a woman who's had her world turned upside down." She handed me a mug of coffee that smelled like heaven, her eyes kind. "For what it's worth, I've never seen Mr. Moretti like this. He's been preparing for a long time." "Preparing to trap me, you mean?" "Preparing to be a father." She glanced at Dante, who was showing Marco how to pour syrup without making a mess. "He's a hard man, yes, dangerous, but he's also capable of great loyalty, great protection. You could do worse for the father of your child." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I'd grabbed it from my locker at the market before Dante had essentially kidnapped us, and now I saw 3 missed calls from my roommate Jenna and a string of increasingly frantic texts. "Where are you?" "Emma, you didn't come home. I'm worried. If you don't answer in the next hour, I'm calling the police." "Problem?" Dante appeared at my elbow, close enough that I could feel the heat of him. "My roommate. She's worried. Call her. Tell her you and Marco are fine, that you've reconnected with an old friend and you'll be staying elsewhere for a while." His hand covered mine on the phone, preventing me from dialing. "But Emma, don't tell her where you are. Don't give her any details that could compromise Marco's security. She's my friend. And I'm sure she's lovely." His voice dropped lower, meant only for my ears. But people talk. They let things slip, even with the best intentions. Until I'm certain there's no threat, the fewer people who know about Marco's connection to me, the better. He was right, and I hated that he was right. I made the call, stepping into the hallway for privacy, feeding Jenna the exact lines Dante had suggested. She didn't buy it. I could hear the skepticism in her voice. but she also knew better than to push when I got evasive. "Just be careful, okay?" she said finally. "And text me every day so I know you're alive." "I will. I promise." When I returned to the kitchen, Marco was chattering about dinosaurs, and Dante was listening with what appeared to be genuine interest, asking questions that made our son light up with excitement. "And the T-Rex had teeth this big." Marco held his hands apart dramatically. "But the Spinosaurus was actually bigger, even though people don't know that. Is that so?" Dante caught my eye over Marco's head, and something passed between us. A moment of shared wonder at this small person we'd created. "You're quite the expert. Mommy takes me to the library every week. I've read all the dinosaur books." Marco shoveled another bite of pancake into his mouth, syrup dripping down his chin. "Do you have any books here?" "I have a library," Dante said, and I could hear the pleasure in his voice. "Would you like to see it after breakfast?" The library was a 2-story room with a spiral staircase and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the gardens. Thousands of books lined the walls, everything from leather-bound classics to modern bestsellers. Marco's gasp of delight was audible. "It's like Beauty and the Beast," he exclaimed, running to the nearest shelf. "Mommy, look." "I see, baby." But I was looking at Dante, who was watching Marco with such intensity it bordered on obsession. "There's a children's section upstairs," he said quietly. "I had it curated specifically for his age group. Educational books, picture books, chapter books for when he's ready." "You've thought of everything." "I've had 3 years to plan, Emma. 3 years of imagining this moment." He moved closer, his voice dropping. 3 years of wondering if I'd ever get the chance to be a father to him, or if I'd spend the rest of my life watching from the shadows. Is that supposed to make me feel sorry for you? The words came out harsher than I intended. You chose to stay away. You could have what? Forced my way into your life when I was barely stable? When I was still waking up with blood on my hands from nightmares about my father's death? His jaw clenched. "I stayed away because I loved you enough to let you go. Because I knew the man I'd become wasn't someone you could love back." "Don't mistake restraint for indifference," Marco called out from the second floor, his voice echoing. "Mommy, there's a reading fort up here. Go," Dante said softly. "Spend time with him. I have some calls to make anyway." I climbed the spiral staircase to find an alcove with cushions and fairy lights, exactly the kind of cozy space a child would dream of. Marco was already curled up with a book about space, completely content. "Can we live here, Mommy?" he asked without looking up from the pages. "Just for a little while? I really like it." My heart cracked a little more. "We'll see, baby. The prince man is nice, and he said I could get a dog if I wanted. A big dog, like a German shepherd." Now Marco did look up, his eyes pleading. "Please? I've always wanted a dog." "Marco." But what could I say? That the prince man was actually a mafia boss? That this beautiful house was built on blood and violence? That staying here meant becoming complicit in a world I'd run from? A commotion downstairs interrupted my spiraling thoughts, raised voices, sharp and angry, followed by Dante's cold command. "I don't care what Castellano wants." He had his chance to negotiate. I left Marco with his book and descended the stairs quietly. Staying in the shadows of the library entrance, Dante stood in the foyer with 3 men I didn't recognize, all of them in dark suits that screamed money and menace. Luca was there too, his hand resting casually on his weapon. "He's threatening to go to the commission," one of the suits said. "Claims you violated the treaty by moving on the waterfront without approval." "The treaty died with my father," Dante replied, his voice like ice over steel. "And if Castellano has a problem with how I run my territory, he's welcome to discuss it with me personally. Though I'd advise him to update his will first." "Sir." "Enough." Dante's hand slashed through the air, a gesture of finality. "Tell Castellano he has 48 hours to vacate the docks. After that, anyone still there becomes a liability I'll handle accordingly." The men shifted uncomfortably, but no one argued. They knew better. As they filed out, Dante's gaze found me in the shadows. For a moment, the cold mask slipped, and I saw the man underneath, tired, stressed, carrying the weight of an empire on his shoulders. "How much did you hear?" he asked once we were alone. "Enough." I stepped into the light. This is what you wanted me to see, isn't it? This is the world you want to bring Marco into. This is the world he's already in, whether you like it or not. He moved toward me with predatory intent. The moment you gave birth to my son, he became a target. That doesn't change whether he's living in luxury or poverty. At least here I can protect him from your own enemies, from everyone. His hands framed my face, thumbs stroking my cheekbones. I know you hate this. I know you wish things were different. But they're not, Emma. They are what they are, and I'm asking you, begging you, to let me keep you both safe. And if I say no, his expression hardened, then I'll get a court order establishing paternity and demanding custody. I'll bury you in lawyers you can't afford, drag you through a system I own, and I'll win because I always win when it matters. His voice softened, became almost gentle. Please don't make me do that. Please don't make this a war. It already is a war, I whispered. You just haven't realized you've already won. Something flickered in his eyes. Triumph, yes, but also something that looked like regret. The sound of small footsteps on the stairs broke the moment. Marco appeared, clutching a book about constellations. Mommy, can we go outside? There's a big yard and I want to explore. Dante stepped back, the ruthless crime lord disappearing behind the mask of the indulgent father. Of course. I'll have Luca accompany you. There's a garden maze that I think you'll enjoy, and a fountain with koi fish. As we headed outside, Dante's hand caught my wrist. Tonight, he murmured, after Marco's asleep, you and I are going to have a very serious conversation about the future, our future. All three of us. It sounded like a promise. It sounded like a threat. It sounded like inevitability. The garden maze was beautiful in the afternoon light, all perfectly trimmed hedges and hidden alcoves with marble benches. Marco ran ahead with the fearlessness of childhood, Luca trailing at a discreet distance, his eyes constantly scanning for threats that a 5-year-old couldn't imagine existed. I should have been watching Marco. Instead, I found myself thinking about tonight, about the conversation Dante had promised, about the fact that I'd already started thinking of this place as a refuge rather than a prison. That was how it started, wasn't it? The slow erosion of resistance. The acceptance of small comforts until you woke up one day and realized you'd forgotten how to leave. Mommy, look, fish. Marco pressed his face against the edge of the fountain, watching the orange and white koi glide through the water like living jewels. They're so pretty. Can I feed them? There's food in the bronze container by the bench, Luca supplied, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man who probably killed people for a living. Mr. Moretti feeds them every morning. Of course he did, because even the fish in Dante's world were pampered, protected, controlled. I watched Marco sprinkle food onto the water's surface, his delighted laughter echoing off the stone walls of the garden, and felt tears prick at my eyes. When was the last time I'd heard him laugh like that? Uninhibited, carefree, without the weight of our struggles pressing down on his small shoulders. You're crying. Luca's observation was quiet, not judgmental. I wiped at my eyes hastily. I'm fine. You're allowed not to be fine, Mrs. Moretti. I'm not. I stopped, because what was the point? I haven't been Mrs. Moretti in 5 years. Mr. Moretti would disagree. Luca's gaze remained fixed on the perimeter, professional, alert. He never stopped wearing his ring, you know, even when everyone told him to move on, to find someone more suitable to his position. I glanced down at my own bare finger, remembering the simple platinum band Dante had slipped on during our courthouse wedding. I'd left it on his dresser the day I'd walked out, certain I'd never want to see it again. He should have moved on, I said quietly. He should have found someone who could handle this life. Maybe. Luca's jaw tightened. Or maybe some people are worth waiting for. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Jenna, this one more pointed. Emma, I'm worried. This doesn't sound like you. If you're in trouble, use the code word. We'd established a code word years ago, back when I'd first started dating after the divorce. A single word that meant, call the police, I'm in danger. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. One word. That's all it would take. But what would happen then? Police would come, I'd make a statement, and then what? Dante had lawyers, judges, entire precincts in his pocket. I'd look paranoid or hysterical, and he'd still have legal grounds to pursue custody. And Marco would be caught in the middle of a war he didn't understand. I'm fine, I typed instead. Just need some time. I'll explain everything soon. The lie sat heavy in my stomach. Dinner was an elaborate affair. Maria had prepared roasted chicken with herbs I couldn't pronounce, vegetables that tasted like they'd been picked that morning, and a chocolate torte for dessert that made Marco's eyes roll back in pleasure. Dante sat at the head of the table, Marco to his right, me to his left, like a family. Like this was normal. Tell me about school, Dante said to Marco, his attention completely focused on our son. What's your favorite subject? Reading, Marco announced proudly. And math, but mostly reading. My teacher says I'm reading at a second grade level already. That's because your mother reads to you every night. Dante's gaze flickered to me, warm with something I didn't want to name. She always loved books, used to stay up until 3 a.m. reading when she thought I was asleep. You knew about that? The question slipped out before I could stop it. I knew everything about you, Kara. His voice dropped lower, intimate despite Marco's presence. I still do. After dinner, Marco's energy finally flagged. I bathed him in a bathroom larger than our entire apartment had been, using soap that smelled like vanilla, and wrapped him in a towel so soft it felt like a cloud. I like it here, he mumbled sleepily as I tucked him into the race car bed. The Prince man is nice, and the food is good, and there's a library. I know, baby. Can we stay? Just for a little while? His eyes, Dante's eyes, pleaded with me. Please? What could I say? How could I explain that staying meant surrendering, that accepting Dante's protection meant accepting everything else that came with it? We'll talk about it tomorrow, I whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. Sleep now. He was asleep before I reached the door. I found Dante in his study, the fire still burning, 2 glasses of wine already poured. He'd changed into dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing forearms that I remembered too well. Sit, he said, and this time it wasn't a command. It was an invitation. I sat, accepting the wine glass, needing the liquid courage. He's happy here, Dante observed, swirling his wine. Did you see his face at dinner? I've never seen a child that excited about vegetables. That's because he's usually eating mac and cheese from a box, I said bitterly. Because that's all I can afford. Emma, no. Let's be honest about what this is. I set down the glass before I could throw it. You're offering me a deal. Comfort, security, everything I can't provide on my own. In exchange for what exactly? What do you want from me, Dante? He was quiet for a long moment, the firelight casting shadows across his face that made him look younger, more vulnerable. I want everything, he said finally. I want Marco to know me as his father. I want Sunday dinners and bedtime stories and scraped knees I can bandage. I want to teach him to ride a bike, to throw a punch, to be a good man despite the blood in his veins. His eyes locked on mine, and I want you back in my bed, in my life, wearing my ring again and meaning it this time. The honesty stole my breath. I can't. I know. He stood, moving around the desk with that liquid grace. I know you're not ready. I know I haven't earned it. But I'm a patient man, Emma. I've waited 5 years. I can wait longer if I need to. He pulled me to my feet, hands settling on my waist like they belonged there. But I won't wait in silence. I won't pretend I don't want you. Every time you're near me, every time I catch your scent or hear your voice, it takes everything I have not to... He cut himself off, jaw clenching. Not to what? The question came out breathier than I intended. His eyes darkened. Not to throw you over my shoulder and remind you exactly what it felt like to be mine. Not to strip away every defense you've built and make you remember that once upon a time you loved me. Not to fuck you until you forget every reason you thought leaving was a good idea. Heat flooded my body, unwanted and undeniable. I should have been offended, should have pulled away. Instead, I swayed closer. That's not love, I whispered. That's obsession. With you? His thumb stroked across my lower lip. It's both. It's always been both. The kiss, when it came, wasn't gentle. It was 5 years of longing and rage and desperation, his mouth claiming mine like he was staking a claim, like he was trying to devour every piece of resistance I had left. And God help me. I kissed him back, my hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, even as my mind screamed at me to stop, to think, to remember all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But my body remembered different things. Remembered the way he'd once made me feel cherished and desired and whole. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. "Stay," he whispered. "Not because I'm forcing you, not because you have no choice. Stay because some part of you, even a small part, wants this too." "I don't know what I want anymore," I admitted. And it was the most honest thing I'd said in days. "Then let me show you." His hands cupped my face with devastating tenderness. "Give me 3 months. 3 months to prove I can be the man you need, the father Marco deserves. Let me show you that this life, our life together, can be more than just survival. And if after 3 months, I still want to leave?" Pain flickered across his face, quickly suppressed. "Then I'll let you go. I'll set you up somewhere safe, somewhere my enemies can't reach, with enough money to never worry again. I'll respect whatever custody arrangement you want, even if it kills me. You'd really do that? For you? For Marco?" He pressed a kiss to my forehead, achingly gentle. "I'd do anything. I'd burn the whole world down if that's what it took to keep you both safe and happy. That's what you've never understood, cara mia. You're not my weakness. You're my entire world." Tears spilled down my cheeks, and I didn't try to stop them. 3 months, I heard myself say. But I want my own room, my own space. This doesn't mean... I know. His smile was sad, knowing. "I'm not asking you to share my bed. Not yet. I'm just asking you to share my life." 3 months later, the winter sun streamed through the breakfast room windows, catching the diamond on my left hand and sending rainbows dancing across the table. I still wasn't used to the weight of it, the engagement ring Dante had presented last night, along with a proposal that had involved our son, a carefully rehearsed speech about family, and tears I'd been powerless to stop. Marco burst into the room wearing his new school uniform. Dante had enrolled him in the city's best private academy, chattering about a field trip to the Natural History Museum. And Dad said he'd come with us, as a chaperone. None of the other kids' dads ever come. Dad. The word still made my heart clench. Dante had earned it, though. 3 months of bedtime stories and homework help and genuine interest in every aspect of Marco's life. 3 months of being the father I'd never dared hope for. Dante appeared behind our son, already dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my first car, and dropped a kiss on the top of Marco's head before moving to me. "Good morning, bellissima." His lips brushed my temple, a gesture that had become routine. Casual affection that felt like coming home. "You're really going on the field trip?" I asked, unable to hide my smile. "I'm really going on the field trip." He poured himself coffee, moving through the morning routine we'd developed. "Though Luca will be there too, just in case." "In case of what? Rogue dinosaur exhibits?" His answering smile was warm. "In case I need someone to help wrangle 20 kindergartners. Have you met 20 kindergartners? They're terrifying." I laughed, and it felt good. Easy, right. The past 3 months had been a revelation. Dante had been patient, respectful of my boundaries, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. But slowly, inevitably, those boundaries had softened. Dinners became conversations that lasted hours. Casual touches became lingering. The guest room I'd insisted on using became a formality I maintained out of stubbornness rather than genuine desire for distance. "I have a meeting this afternoon," Dante said, his tone shifting to business. "Castellano finally agreed to negotiate. Should be resolved peacefully. And if it's not peaceful," his eyes met mine, honest and unflinching, "then it won't be. But I'll make sure Marco never sees that side of things. I promised you that." He had. And so far, he'd kept every promise. After Dante and Marco left for school, our son talking animatedly about dinosaurs while his father listened with genuine interest, I found Maria in the kitchen. "You look happy," she observed, kneading dough for tonight's bread. "I am," I admitted, surprised by how true it was. I didn't think this could work. Love usually works when both people fight for it. She shaped the dough with practiced hands. And Mr. Moretti has been fighting for you since the day you left. My phone rang. Jenna, who I'd finally met for coffee last week, and explained everything. Well, almost everything. She knew about Dante, about Marco, about the fact that we were trying to make things work. She didn't need to know the darker details. So? She demanded without preamble. Did you say yes? I looked down at the ring on my finger, at the sunlight streaming through windows of a house that had become home, at the life I was building with a man I'd once run from. I said yes. Her squeal of delight made me hold the phone away from my ear. That evening, after Marco was asleep and the house had settled into quiet, I found Dante in our bedroom, not the guest room, but the master suite I'd finally agreed to share 2 weeks ago. He stood by the window, still in his suit pants but shirtless, the lamplight casting shadows across the scars that marked his back, evidence of a life I was still learning to accept. How was the meeting? I asked, closing the door behind me. Resolved. He turned to face me, and I saw the tension in his shoulders. Peacefully, as promised. Though I suspect Castellano will try something eventually. Men like him always do, and when he does, I'll handle it. He moved toward me, hands settling on my waist. But not tonight. Tonight, I just want to be with my family. With you. I reached up to loosen his collar, fingers working the buttons of his shirt. Then be with me. The kiss was different this time, slower, deeper, weighted with 3 months of growing trust and rediscovered love. When he lifted me into his arms and carried me to the bed, it felt like a homecoming. I love you, he whispered against my skin, his voice rough with emotion. I never stopped, even when I should have, even when it would have been easier. I know. I pulled him closer, breathing in the scent of him, cedar and smoke and home. I love you too. God help me, I love you too. Later, wrapped in silk sheets with Dante's arm heavy across my waist, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The pain, the separation, the fear, the slow rebuilding of trust, the discovery that sometimes love wasn't enough, but commitment and effort, and the genuine desire to be better, could bridge the gap. What are you thinking? Dante's voice was drowsy, content. That I'm happy, I said honestly. That Marco is happy. That maybe this is where we were always supposed to end up. He pressed a kiss to my shoulder. Took you long enough to realize it. I elbowed him gently, earning a quiet laugh. Through the window I could see the gardens lit by moonlight, the fountain where Marco fed the fish every morning, the maze where we'd walked as a family just yesterday. Beyond the gates, the city sprawled in glittering chaos, dangerous, unpredictable, full of threats I was learning to navigate. But here, in this moment, wrapped in the arms of a man who'd waited 5 years for a second chance, I felt safe. I felt home. And when Marco crawled into bed with us at dawn, wedging himself between us with the confidence of a child who knew he was loved, I knew we'd made the right choice. All of us. Together.